Miller Knight, a smashing success. We'll recap one of the games of the year coming up on Locked On Sabres.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Joe DiBiase, ready for this show, fired up for this show. First time first time since last year that we get to talk about a jersey retirement ceremony and an incredible night to be in the arena as the Sabres beat the New York Islanders in overtime by a score of 3-2. We'll recap the game. I've got thoughts on how the ceremony went and the Sabres doing a great job. Our GOAT of the night is coming up as well. And we'll take a sail across the Atlantic and look at how the standings look both in the division and, more importantly, the wild card race. It's starting to look better and better because the other teams are losing around the Sabres. So all that is ahead here on the podcast at Sneaky Joe Sports. Follow me on Twitter. The YouTube channel for Locked On Sabres, go to YouTube, type in Locked On Sabres. Easiest way to find it there. And if you want the podcast account on Twitter, it is at Locked On Sabres. Miller Knight was a smashing success. Every little thing about it was perfect. Every seat in the house was filled. The crowd was electric. And the atmosphere was incredible both during the ceremony and during the game. The Sabres themselves knocked it out of the park with the ceremony. I made this point on yesterday's show that every time they've been faced with something like this, since really Hasek had his number retired, and it was embarrassing, they've done a great job. RJ Knight in particular, last year they did a great job, and this year they did a great job with Ryan Miller. RJ being involved, the Marty and Brian Duff did a great job. Miller's speech. Miller is very good too in terms of public speaking. He's not maybe as fiery of a speaker as RJ was, but very intense. So Miller did a great job having his family involved. Also the Roswell Park fund that they established for him and making his community work a large part of the ceremony, I thought was really cool. The alumni, right? Like, kind of cool how they introduced them. It was weird how they selected, though, who would get a specific introduction and the others would just kind of get a group, right? Like it was Nathan Gerbe, Henrik Tallinder, Patrick Lalime. Like Tallinder maybe should have made the cut for a real introduction, no? Because then it was, captain of the Sabres, fifth all-time in goals, Thomas Vanek. And then it was captain of the Sabres, the game-winning goal against Ottawa, Jason Pominville. They got their own setup. But Tallinder didn't get his own setup. I don't know. But anyways, the alumni on hand was really cool. You had Derek Roy in the house. Derek Roy, by the way, looks like he could still play. Dude is not aged. And what probably helps that is, little time in Europe. He's picked up some fashion trends. He's got the black turtleneck coming up and the mustache with the lighter beard all around it. Derek Roy, you could tell that guy just spent 6 years playing hockey in Europe. Drew Stafford in the house. Drew Stafford, by the way, did that guy play quarterback at any point during his Sabre career? Because when they were doing the T-shirt toss in the commercial timeouts in the arena, Stafford is throwing these T-shirts 50 yards. Dude is launching these T-shirts. So Drew Stafford in the house, Tim Connolly in the house. Saw that he was on crutches. No IR jokes. Come on, people. Let's be respectable here. But Connolly was there. Lalime was there, as I mentioned. Who else? You had Jim Corsi, the Sabres' old goaltender coach, and Miller's old goaltender coach was in the house. Nathan Gerbe, Tim Kennedy. I mentioned Tallinder. Then they did a great job like incorporating other alumni that couldn't be there with video messages throughout the game. Dominic Hasek with a couple of different video messages, Lindy Ruff with a couple of video messages, Mike Greer, Danny Briere. Danny Briere got a big time ovation when he went up on that Jumbotron. So, and those guys are, working within hockey still. Love Ruff is the coach of the Devils. Greer is the head GM of the Sharks, and Briere is the assistant GM of the Philadelphia Flyers. So a lot of those guys are, doing their own thing. So it's understandable why they were not there. I will say, I was a little disappointed that Max Finneganov was not there. I'm not saying I'm surprised he wasn't there. He's, if you listen to me enough and you know this podcast enough, he was my favorite athlete growing up, my favorite Sabre growing up. And the reason why I feel a little sad about it is he's such a cult hero for Buffalo Sabre fans. I mean, you walk around that arena. I dare you to count the jerseys in that arena and tell me anyone that's not currently on the team right now has more jersey representation there than Max Afinogenov. There are more Afinogenov jerseys at every Sabre game than Briere, than Miller, not last night for Miller, but usually, than Vanek. There are so many Max jerseys in the every single arena every time. If he didn't come back for this, he's probably never coming back. And that's fine, right? Like, what was it going to be? He wasn't going to say anything to the crowd. He's not getting his jersey retired at any point. He's probably not going to be placed in the Sabres Hall of Fame at any point. But just to see him in the arena and even to have that one moment, that 5-second moment where they would introduce him and the crowd to go crazy. Oh, that would have been glorious. But I don't think we're ever getting it because this was kind of it, right? This was the celebration for that team, that 05-06 team. Miller will be the only jersey retired from that team. Maybe some others will go into the Hall of Fame like Vanek. Maybe Briere goes into a Sabres Hall of Fame at some point. But my guess is, the way things are with Russia now in the world, I don't know how easy it is to travel from Russia to the United States and back. Just a guess that Max Finneganov is just going to probably never come to one of these things. Just kind of how it is. But again, not a surprise. The guy lives halfway across the world. Speaking of the Sabres Hall of Fame, that was the one other point I wanted to get to about the ceremony. The Sabres included in the jersey retirement Miller being inducted into the Sabres Hall of Fame, the forgotten about Sabres Hall of Fame. No one had been inducted into the Sabres Hall of Fame since Dominik Hasek was. Alexander McGillney was 11 years ago. It had been 11 years since anybody did that. And now that they put Miller in, and Miller in his speech even thanked the committee for the Hall of Fame, and he named them. Terry Pagula was on the committee, and Larry Playfair, and Rob Ray, and a lot of other former Sabres that were involved in that. That, I don't know, maybe they're firing that back up. I'd like to see, before you really know they're firing it back up totally, are they going to have a Sabres Hall of Fame ceremony at some point for someone that's just getting in the Sabres Hall of Fame? They once did that with Dale Hawerchuk and Alexander McGillney. I think the last two to get in. It was just a ceremony for those two. They weren't getting their jerseys retired, but they got their swords before the game. It was a chance to remember them and to celebrate them without putting their number in the rafters. That is something the Sabres need to get going on. And I hope this is a sign that they're going to, that we can have a Thomas Vanek night without having to retire jersey number 26. And he goes into the Sabres Hall of Fame. That we can have I'd love a Finnegan to get in, but we can have who else would make the Sabres Hall of Fame those teams? Jason Pominville. Without retiring number 29, we can have a Jason Pominville night where he gets into the Hall of Fame. I think they need to fire the Hall of Fame back up just for the nights, just to have the nights where the guys are back in, they give a little speech, and you don't have to keep flooding the rafters with numbers. So cool that they did that with Miller, and I hope that they continue it. When we come back, the game itself, an incredible game to talk about. Goat head of the night, one of the greatest individual performances I thought of the season by a Buffalo Sabre. That is ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We're brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories, and you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little bit healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier, but don't want to compromise taste, and man, I've got the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. And what makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but the bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now, you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres with a 3-2 victory over the New York Islanders. A big game in the standings, but we'll get to the standings in just a little bit here. The Sabres outplayed the New York Islanders from beginning to end in this affair. It was, I mean, they looked like two different teams, and like in terms of caliber, in terms of quality. The Sabres were just running over them. The Islanders were playing typical Islanders hockey, back on their heels, blocking shots, asking their goalie to make incredible saves. And by the way, Ilya Sorokin, for a lot of casual hockey fans that are big Sabre fans that don't watch the rest of the league a ton, did you get a load of that guy? He's probably going to be a Vezina finalist this year. Might have been your first chance to see him up close and personal. Holy cow, is Ilya Sorokin a great goaltender. But in this game, the Sabres outshot the New York Islanders 45-26. And the Sabres had 78 shot attempts at 5-on-5 in this game. Shot attempts at 5-on-5. That is the most the Sabres have had in an individual game going all the way back to 2007. And that's only because that's the first year that Natural Stat Trick was tracking this. So as long as Natural Stat Trick has been tracking shot attempts for individual teams, that is the most the Sabres have had in one game in the last 15 years. Really, it could be ever. I don't know. There might have been a game in the 70s where Perot and the French Connection had more than 78 shot attempts, but it could possibly be the most shot attempts they've ever had in a game. It was incredible how many they got. And by the way, I was in the stands. Nothing drives me crazier. The worst guy in the crowd at a hockey game is the shoot guy. Every two seconds, the guy's got a puck. Shoot, buddy. They had the most shot attempts in any game ever. Come on, shoot. I was losing my mind because they were getting shots blocked. They obviously, 45 shots on 78 shot attempts is actually not that great. That's 31 shots blocked, and that's only 5-on-5. So really, it probably was more than 31 shots blocked by the Islanders. The shoot guys just drive me crazy. But the Sabres were incredible in this game. I thought all four lines played very well. I will say this, though. If there have one minor criticism of the Sabres in this game, it is that honestly, if it's of an individual, Tage Thompson just doesn't look right, doesn't he? I'm not panicking. I'm not saying anything about him as a player or a season or the contract, but it doesn't look right, does he? The last 4 or 5 games, and I know the stats aren't there to represent it, so you could just look at the stats and say, oh, he doesn't look right. I'm watching him, and he really doesn't look right. He's turning the puck over more. A lot of these toe drag moves that typically where he was executing are almost looking like easy plays by the defenseman. He's fanning on pucks when he has open shooting opportunities. He's not getting into these one-timer spots. So I don't know. I feel like Thompson is a little bit off in his last couple of games. I'm not overreacting to it. Again, I'm not even saying break up the first line. But if you look back in Thompson's his last 7 games, he has 2 goals and 3 assists. That's fine, right? 5 points, but 2 goals in 7 games. You'd want more from him. It's reminiscent of the beginning of the season where he had 1 goal in his first 7 games. So it happens. The guy's not going to score on a 150-point pace every game for the entire year, or he'd have 150 points. This is why you might expect him to get 100 points, because he's not going to be a 150-point guy the whole year. But anyway, it's just a minor gripe is that Thompson has not looked right. But otherwise, I thought every line played well. And man, I got to give a shout out to the Casey Middlestat, Tyson Jost, Victor Olofsson line. Everyone was criticizing that line all year. I was at the front of the line. I thought that line was terrible. They were getting poor results at 5-on-5. I thought they were getting artificially inflated stats because of their power play usage. But they have been a lot better in the last few games. Olofsson is scoring goals. Middlestat is racking up the assists. Middlestat has 7 assists in his last 8 games. 7 in his last 8, which brings his total to 27 points in 44 games on the season. That's about a 50-point pace on the year. Olofsson, by the way, is at 4 goals in his last 5 games and 6 goals in his last 8 games. So, and a lot of these goals, by the way, for Olofsson are at 5-on-5. Of those 8 goals in that stretch, None are on the power play. Let me just double check that I have that right. I just want to make sure. Yeah, none are on the power play. 8 even strength goals or 6 even strength goals. So Olsen is playing incredible. Middlestad's playing incredible. Tyson Jost is good too. Jost has really, I think, helped that line along a lot. But Middlestad's driving it. Don't get me wrong. Like, although Jost has helped it, Middlestad is driving it, and it's his speed. He's more decisive with the puck. He's not hesitating ever. He's using his body well. But the number one asset he's got going for him right now is that speed. I think maybe behind only Alex Tuck and JJ Peterka, he's the third fastest player on the team, and he's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour at all times. So kudos to Middlestat, because I think he is the engine that is running that line in the last 2 weeks. But have not mentioned yet my goat head of the night. And you're probably wondering, Joe, it's been 15 minutes. You haven't mentioned this guy by name. Rasmus Dahlin. Rasmus Dahlin is the GOAT head of the night in a runaway. I might hazard to say it was the best individual performance by a Sabre all season. And that's despite the fact that, he only had two assists and no goals. I mean, he had a game where he had 5 points earlier in the season. It's because of the control of the game, the individual plays, setting up plays in the neutral zone, doing every little thing right. And not one, not two, but 3 highlight reel plays in this game from Rasmus Dahlin. You started with almost a coast-to-coast where he toe drags to the center when he's going up the left wall in the first period and gets a shot on goal that's saved by Sorokin. And then in the third period, he picks a puck up that was behind him in his own end. He gets to actually turn around, and while he's skating backwards, flips his hips around, and he almost goes coast to coast. He makes a juke move on the point, on the forechecker at the point in the offensive zone. He goes around another player and actually gets tripped, but they don't call it. And then from his knees has the balance to go backhand, forehand, and get a scoring chance on Ilya Sorokin. And the best play of the night, of course, the highlight of the night, the play on the game winner, 12 seconds into overtime, Dahlin with a Josh Allen, like, over the top, rainbow pass, splits the safeties right on the tape of Dylan Cousins. Cousins did a great job corralling it and then finishing, but that is the best pass of the season by a Sabre, by Rasmus Dahlin. The length of the ice over Islanders players, like they're linebackers trying to jump up in zone coverage. Unbelievable play by Dahlin. He is the GOAT head of the night. 2 apples on the night for him. And what did he end up playing in terms of ice time? Dahlin on the night played 25 minutes in 12 seconds. So, of course, that led the team in ice time. So, when we come back with that win over the Islanders, they did let the Islanders get a point, but how are they looking now in the standings? It was a big game for that, and I'll let you know where they currently stand as we are recording here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. That is next. Welcome back to the Locked On Sabres podcast with Joe DiBiase. All right, let's take a sail across the Atlantic. We're going to look at the Atlantic Division, and we are also going to look at the wild card race. Well, in the Atlantic Division, if you're looking around, you had the Panthers with a win. They continue to stay hot. They have won 6 of their last 10 now. I guess that qualifies as hot, with a 6-2 win over the Montreal Canadiens. Matthew Tkachuk with 2 goals. Sam Reinhart with 3 points on the night. The Panthers now are 2 points ahead of the Sabres, but the Sabres maintain their games in hand advantage. Sabres have 3 games extra to play that Florida does not have. Right above them, above the Panthers, not a playoff spot, but 1 spot below a playoff spot, is the New York Islanders. The Sabres maintain, because they played in the same night, of course, Sabres maintain a three games in hand on the Islanders. Now, Sabres are only 4 points back of the Islanders. So you go 2-3 in your 3 games, and you're tied with the Islanders in the standings. I think the Sabres are a better team than the Islanders, and I think Thursday night was some pretty clear evidence of that. Pittsburgh is in the second wildcard spot with 51 points in 44 games. So they play Ottawa tonight. We'll see. They are favored in that game at home. I might expect they do it. And by the time you're listening to this, they might be sitting at 53 points, which would be the Sabres with a game in hand and 6 points back. But for now, Sabres are 4 points out of a playoff spot and behind a Penguins team that's only won 3 of their last 10. And we've been tracking the Capitals because I'm keeping an eye on them because they've played more games than anybody. Sabres have 4 games in hand on the Washington Capitals. They won against the Coyotes 4-0. Dylan Strome with 2 goals in that one. So it looks pretty good. You gained a point on the Islanders. You gained 2 points on the Penguins. You stayed level with the Panthers, or at least you didn't let them gain anything on you on the night, and you didn't let Washington gain anything on you on the night either. So Sabres maintain their status of being in a playoff race. And that is going to do it for us here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Next up, we got a black and red game. Kids Day, Saturday matinee, 12:30 against a horrible Anaheim Ducks team. A very, very quick preview on that. I hesitate to say it's a must-win for the Sabres because of how bad the team is, because Sabres have lost some of the worst teams in hockey this year. They've lost to the Coyotes, they've lost to Chicago, and they have lost to the Philadelphia Flyers. So, take it with a grain of salt. Sabres should stomp the Ducks in this game. The Ducks are actually on pace for like 53 points. They have 31 points in 46 games. They have the worst goal differential in hockey at -83 by 20. By 20. The Ducks are at -83. Second last is the Blue Jackets at -63. Sabres should stomp the Canadians, or excuse me, the Ducks in this one. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Locked On Sabres podcast. Enjoy Sabres and Ducks, and we will talk to you hopefully after a Sabres win and a Bills win here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.